And we're joined by Tony Gachoka, who is the former Chief of Protocol for Prime Minister, the late Honourable Raila Odinga. And we'll be looking into Raila's legacy, lessons on political alliance building. And we have that conversation with Tony. Tony, good morning.
Good morning. Let me start by, saying hongera sana to millions of Kenyans, including the government, the family of the late Raila Odinga, led by his wife, Ida, his children, Rosemary, Junior, and Winnie, together with his wider family, Oburu and Ruth, and everybody, including the church, that gave a befitting send-off to a Kenyan giant.
Yeah.
It was an incredible feat, achieved with minimum problems, and a glorified send-off for Raila Odinga.
Great to hear. Dennis will welcome you with today's proverb. We'd love to hear your interpretation of it.
Yeah, so today we are in Cabo Verde, also known as Cape Verde. Approximately 560,000 people is the population as at 2025 estimates. They speak Portuguese, and the currency is known as Cape Verdean Escudo, CVE. But today they are giving us a proverb here. Every step has its time. Every step has its time. How would you interpret that?
Wow, this is a wonderful one, because it reminds me about how you treat a baby or teach a baby to walk. When a parent have a newborn baby, other than the first cry that a baby makes, the next important part in a baby's life is the first walk or crawl. And it becomes symbolic of the beginning of life. In more ways than the child being able to walk, it's actually what the child will go throughout that life. So I think it's from inception that when you take the first walk, then you begin the adventure of life itself. And I see it in the wider context of the challenges of the fullness of life at the beginning of life.
You remind me of a baby's first step, but I remember for me, it was the first pee and poop.
Oh, really?
That really struck me, because
You were like, what? How can something so small?
so small means so much, Yeah, the first smile, of course.
And you can imagine people even videotape it and so on. Where were you when the baby first took a walk? And it's a really enlightening time.
Interesting.
Indeed. Quite so. So, I mean, no apt or better time to then be able to look into Raila Odinga's legacy. And one of the things that he did do was political alliance building for every 5 years, easily for the last 30 years. And there are lessons to be learned from that. What's your take?
What I have to say first will be a bit controversial, because I believe that the Honourable Prime Minister Raila Odinga had to die for Kenya to know that Raila Odinga was Raila Odinga. And I'll repeat myself. It is a tragedy that the Honourable Right Honourable Raila Odinga had to die for this country to know really who Raila Odinga was. In fact, in a very ironical way, I feel his death is his greatest achievement, because in it, he made everybody stop. He made everybody stop and look at themselves. He became, in my view, the Kenyan line of defense towards political integrity and political character. And before the death of Raila Odinga, the biggest symbol as Kenya we had before was independence. And I think that in the last few weeks, what has come from people from all walks of life, from all political creed, has been to what extent has Raila Odinga been a legend and why? And then comes the question that you ask about his capacity to reach out. That in life, people who were his critics would say he was trying to achieve for himself. He was trying to better his take for his party or his family or himself. But in death, when people look at it dispassionately, they begin to say, hold on, there was a philosophy, there was a thinking, there was a Kenya First, a philosophical agenda by Raila in the moves that he made. Now, let us critically look at the so-called Raila alliances. And the first one would have been when he had been detained by retired president and late President Daniel Moi. 8 years of incarceration, away from his family. As you heard from Koiwa Mwere and other writers, the injuries that he obtained, physical, including his eyes, his back, and so forth. And then after those 8 years, he rejoined the political system in Kenya, competed in politics, and later joined KANU, where he became the Secretary General of the Kenya African Union. And by joining Moi, he was actually joining his jailer. He was actually making political pact with somebody who had actually incarcerated him and denied him much of his family's young life. From that point on, Right Honorable Raila Odinga was to face another controversial election in 2007. Which led to the tribal clashes, including many Kenyans being charged with the ICC for crimes against humanity. And that became an ungovernable situation, requiring international attention, both at the ICC and here in Kenya for mediation. Raila Odinga subjected himself to the mediation of Kofi Annan and Mwai Kibaki, and that itself resulted in a government of national unity that formed the office of the Prime Minister, being the second time since the independence of Kenya. The office of Prime Minister was formed with two deputies who are then Uhuru Kenyatta and Musalia Mudavadi, and that went ahead to achieve the 2010 Constitution, another issue of compromise. After that, following elections came, and Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga had another tiff. And again, Raila Odinga made a political pact with Uhuru, and there was a handshake that saw the Uhuru government complete its term. And before he died, Uhuru Kenyatta's coalition was not the last. He sat down with Obasanjo of Nigeria and William Ruto in Mombasa, and they discussed that the country was not going in the right direction. And Obasanjo was to say during the funeral that he's very happy that Ruto listened to him, because that funeral would not have happened had Raila not sat down with Ruto to form the broad-based government. Now, I'm saying these things because when Raila was alive, in the words of his sister Ruth Odinga, a lot of Kenyans, particularly the young Kenyans, condemned and wished Raila dead. And in fact, they blamed him for giving away the Gen Z victory to Ruto, and therefore that Ruto would have actually been removed by the military or otherwise had Raila Odinga not intervened. But in the tributes and in the celebration that followed the burial of Raila Odinga, the tone and the character of the Kenyan nation stopped and changed. It became accolade after accolade after accolade for having achieved to stabilize the country and having left the country with a philosophy of having to rethink how alliances are made. I'm saying this because it was quite politicized who attended and who did not attend the burial ceremony of the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. There was a complaint. The members of the opposition who attended the burial were not given the same kind of opportunity to say their part as was the government side. It was also quite poignant to me that Rigathi Gachagua, one of the prominent leaders of the opposition, did not show at all in any of the ceremonies.
What do you think about those two things? Number one, of course, I think members of the opposition, you speak directly to Kalonzo Musyoka, and then Rigathi Gachagua on the other side. What do you think about those two?
I feel it's a failure for their leadership, because this became a national event. Because, you know, in terms of the one side of government, not giving them the right platform to agitate was a mistake. The government should have and must have given an opportunity for the opposition to have spoken their condolences and their contributions, whatever they may be, to the national unity. I feel that took away from the authenticity that was left, at least in Nyayo Stadium, for the national character of this great Kenyan. Raila would have wanted more. Raila would have himself insisted that his critics have an opportunity to say what they had to say during his burial. But when it comes to Rigathi Gachagua, which is a separate issue, and given the undertones that surround the polarity in government, I think it was a personal error of judgment not to go to Karen to see Mama Aida, not to show at the national event, certainly in Nyayo National Stadium or at Parliament buildings to pay his respects to Raila Odinga. I felt that was not in character. But I want to come specifically to this topic that you've raised today about how this death is going to affect the alliances that go forward. Because we have a situation where alliances in Kenya have been among friends. Where now, if I agree, Kalonzo is very, very happy with Eugene Wamalwa, and Wamalwa is very happy with Martha Karua. So we go and we join this people's coalition because all good talk, all good friends, and we say we are going to take power. That is the easier route that Kenya has taken in 3 elections, where people come together, nasawale, go to court, go to whatever, and then go to elections. What has been the case until the death of Raila has been, it was taboo to talk to your enemy. It was not possible that you could actually, in making that alliance, look for somebody you're not really in bed with, or somebody you're not thinking you can form an alliance with. And I want to give you the example. When Musalia Mudavadi said in the last election that he's going to cause an earthquake, there were many people in his alliance who started to say hard words. Why? How can you leave us? You're going to be finished, you whatever. And
what was that earthquake, by the way? I'm yet to
he left Azimio la Umoja to join Kenya Kwanza coalition.
Oh, that was the earthquake.
That was the earthquake. Right, okay. And as a consequence, many will argue that the votes that Ruto got to win came from the Mudavadi Fort Kenya coalition that made him win. Why am I raising this issue of coalition? I'm raising this because before the death of Mheshimiwa Raila Odinga, President William Ruto and KANU chairman Gideon Moi had just begun discussions of coalitions. And this coalition discussion began just before President Ruto went to Baringo. And this was just on the eve of the senatorial bid that was to take place between KANU and UDA. And apparently, at that point, both the two leaders, the KANU chairman and the UDA leader, began to say that KANU would be coming fully back in government and that KANU was going to help in what is going on. Since the barrio, something else has happened. It has shown that inside the talks of President William Ruto was Uhuru Kenyatta. That Uhuru Kenyatta has been talking to President Ruto, and this has been engineered by Raila Odinga. And of course, now the country is aware that Gideon Moi and KANU are in talks with William Ruto and his government. So I think it's a very critical time to be clear about what is happening behind the scenes and what is happening about these coalition talks. So I would want to confirm here on SpiceFM in this morning that KANU is in formal deep talks with the government of William Ruto and his UDA party, and that KANU has made a decision to work with the Kenya Kwanza government. And that itself has been a decision that has been part of ongoing decisions or discussions that had gone before the death of Raila and have seemingly going on now, meaning what can be achieved by coming together with the current government as opposed to opposing it. To be clear, because I think the last time I was here, there's questions, okay, now if KANU is going, is Gideon Moi going alone? Has KANU processed this issue? You, Tony Gachoka, are running for governor of Nairobi. What does that mean? I think there has been a lot of ambiguity. And I think there is no need to keep the country guessing anymore. We must all say that as a KANU political party, as a NEC, as an organization, we have made a decision to work with the government of President William Ruto. And that includes Tony Gachoka defending or fighting for the gubernatorial seat in Nairobi with a KANU ticket in a coalition that will involve the government coalition.
So at the point, Tony, as you talk about alliances and coalitions that are formed before the election, there is always the question of what a political party stands for, right? So here's a question where one would say the Kenya Kwanza government and KANU at some point were not seeing eye to eye, but all issues aside, let's sit on the table and agree on the way forward. So in terms of, say, Tony Gachoka is running for Nairobi gubernatorial seat under KANU. Where does that leave UDA and its ambitions in Nairobi to also present a governor? At that point, is there consensus that one would have to drop, or we go as KANU despite the fact that you're supporting Kenya Kwanza government?
Yeah, from the KANU point of view, for example, we did not run in Baringo. The decision not to run in Baringo was made as a decision that would help the coalition, that UDA would run the Baringo senatorial candidate and KANU would pull out. We expect that as KANU, when it comes to Nairobi, on the gubernatorial seat, when KANU gives its candidate, who is Tony Gachoka, that the UDA candidate will not be the candidate. And that resolution or that compromise is part of those deliberations and talks. We would be providing a united candidate to fight a united opposition. So part of KANU going into the UDA government is not that KANU in any way will dissolve. KANU will remain an independent party. I saw the president also confirming that UDA and ODM will remain independent parties. So this will be a coalition of parties. It will not be a political constituent party. It will be a coalition of parties. And among the stakes that KANU is expecting out of this alliance is to take the Nairobi gubernatorial seat. And in fact, discussions are already well underway of how in which now we are going to give each other space. And of course, you must also be aware that ODM itself is going through some kind of remodeling. With of course, the passing of Jacom, ODM does not have a de facto party leader who can be able to, all of a sudden take it where it was when Jacom was there. There will be a lot of reorganization, including some new leadership and new thinking in ODM. You heard the other day the revival of the NADCO report. The NADCO report foresees the creation of a prime minister and two deputies, a leader of the official opposition and his deputies. How will that, affect the structure of the country? Now, those discussions, which are ongoing, are going to involve KANU in a very deep way. What I wanted to be very clear about here is that KANU is not one leg in and one leg out. I just wanted to be absolutely clear that there is a new coalition as directed by the party chairman, Gideon Moi, and that ongoing discussion now has reached the point where a government reorganization is imminent and the political architecture of working together is now underway.
Clearly, Tony, you have more information than we do in terms of the new arrangement between KANU and the government. So in terms of government reorganization, and we know that you've stated that Nairobi would be one of the areas where you expect UDA to pull back and allow KANU to go for the seat. But remember that UDA already is in one way as another organization or another agreement with ODM. So how is KANU in that conversation between UDA and ODM, and will ODM as well be fielding, and how does that make things difficult for you? But then again, also, let's look at the reorganization of government. Are we likely to see cabinet positions given to KANU?
Yes. In fact, the only two people, as I am aware, who are opting out of entering government is George Wainaina, who is the Secretary General of KANU, because of the position he holds nationally, would retain his Secretary General and not be available for government appointment. The other one is Tony Gachoka, because I want to concentrate on, my bid for Nairobi will not be seeking any position in government. But other than that, the chairman has a robust list of people that we are looking at, and already some names have been asked for vetting and consideration. And it's just important to inform the public so that it's not a matter of conjecture, that KANU is actually actively going to renegotiate the Kenya Kwanza coalition. And that means, yes, in competition with ODM. That means, yes, in competition with the Wetangulas for Kenya. What KANU is saying, we are the strongest and the oldest political party. As you are aware, the issue of political parties in Kenya began in 1918 when people were talking about the East African Association. Then KAU came in 1944, and KANU was the oldest party that began in 1963. So if you were to look at people saying ODM at 20, we can easily say KANU at 62. Currently, KANU has 6 MPs in parliament, and KANU has never missed any elective seat since its foundation. And being the country's oldest party, this is a time when the party must stand up, when the country and the character of the country is being changed, and play a role so that it can be effectively included in national affairs. And I think, without overemphasizing it, Raila has removed the shame that somebody can talk with your enemy, that somebody can talk to somebody with whom you don't agree in a Mandela-like way. Raila has said, look, it's all right to engage the people with whom you don't agree if in the resultant conclusion you have a better country and a better system of governance.
Allow me to ask just 2 questions, but they're related. Maybe you can have a stab at both. Firstly, were you supportive of Raila Odinga when he said that he was going to join the KK government, to join the broad-based government? If I recall, you were a bit critical of that move at the time. So that's the first question.
Yes.
The second one is, when we say that parties have then joined to work together, how much more is it than just individuals getting positions in cabinet or getting appointments?
Wonderful question. At a personal level, I was very concerned after the 24 June uprising of the Gen Z. I was very, very concerned, having participated with Raila Odinga in many, many demonstrations over the years. I was very, very disturbed with how the government dealt with suppressing those uprisings, and to the extent where it led to abductions, where it led to violence and maiming and shooting of people. Of course, I was horrified, as most Kenyans were, and I raised my voice very loudly about it, including Raila's silence over the matter. And that is a matter of public record. I cannot take it back. I don't think that neither Raila or Ruto should have taken the country through that at all. It is a shameful part of Kenyan history. I hope it's a chapter that will never be repeated, and a chapter for which, at the right point, anybody who was guilty of those things must be brought to book. Police men and women, those who funded, those who encouraged it, must be brought to justice, and that I stand by. With regard to individuals, I've been reading when people say, oh, ule jamaa ameenda huko juu amenunuliwa. Now, how much can you buy Gideon Moi? You know, sometimes, Kenyans need to also become serious when they are saying, look, I don't like the political decision you've taken, but not to say that because of money. You know, there are some people who are beyond being bought. They make decisions basically on the principle of what they stand in. It was one of the most difficult decisions for Honorable Gideon Moi to join the government. For those who remember, on the day he did eventually, the people of Baringo had poured on the streets. There were thousands and thousands of people waiting for him to give his papers. And the discussions that were going on behind the scenes for him not to do so became so intense that until 4 p.m. that afternoon, a decision had not been made. When the decision was made, it was not made because of money. It was made because of the betterment of what Gideon Moi considered was a unifying element that this would bring to the country. And when you now find out what was said during Raila Odinga's funeral, you can see that these discussions had gone on for some time. They didn't start at the Baringo by-election issue. They had been ongoing with Uhuru Kenyatta's involvement, with Raila Odinga's involvement, with William Ruto's involvement, with the involvement of Basanjo, with the involvement of Gideon Moi. And so at the end, when all these things came together, the questions are this, and I want to ask SpiceFM today. The alternative to removing the Ruto government is the Gachagua-led coalition. The Gachagua-led coalition also needs to be defined in this conversation. Because when I was considering my views when I met Gideon Moi as Tony Gachoka, I was considering telling him, look, you've made this decision to join the government. Am I comfortable with this decision? And can I do it? And we had that candid conversation, as you would expect any serious member of a party to do. And I looked back at the alternative. I know Kalonzo Musyoka very well. I have met him and sat in his office. We have discussed the Nairobi gubernatorial seat. He has given me his views. I'll leave them private. I've given him my views. I'll leave them private. I have sat down with the Honorable Eugene Wamalwa in his office, not once, not 5 times, with regard to my bid to be the gubernatorial candidate for Nairobi. We've had a discussion. I'll leave it there. The person I don't know very well in this whole thing is Gachagua.
Perhaps you need to have a talk with him in his office.
Well, I actually don't know him very well. I met him in the struggle just a few weeks as he came on. I knew his late brother, but I never knew him because politically, Rigathi Gachagua was never one of us. He was never in the bomber struggle. He was never in the agitation for a multi-party democracy.
You make it sound like a club, Tony, that somebody needs membership to be part
I'm saying
of.
where I was. I'm saying Raila Odinga was, James Orengo was, Anyang' Nyong'o was, Wamalwa Kijana was, Charity Ngilu. I can tell you the people who agitated. Givuda Kibwana was there, Amolo Otiende. So I can tell you the people we met in Bomas or the people we met in the struggle. All I'm saying is I never met Rigathi Gachagua there. So I do not know him and we never interacted. Where we have met from time to time is in public issues. So I do not know him that I would have sat in his office to discuss a deep political issue.
Okay.
But I wanted to come to the bigger political matter to say.
But I need you to answer that question for me. Is that when we talk about parties then not really folding, but then coming together, what beyond cabinet appointments or other job appointments is there beyond? What working together are we talking about? Because it would look as though these broad-based governments or this working together is essentially to appoint generals of certain political parties and give them a job. How is this working together? Like now you said Kanu is joining the Kenya Kwanza government. How beyond individuals getting cabinet positions? I mean, there's already the chatter about that there could be a cabinet reshuffle and we're likely to see some Kanu generals then get positions. Beyond those appointments, how are they actually working together for the betterment of Kenya?
So with the enactment of the 2010 constitution, political coalitions are critical because anybody to contest and win the presidency must garner 50+1% of the vote. You must then gather half of the counties, over 25% vote in half of the counties, which means that you must have beyond the traditional political party what you call an ethnic political base, because in that way you would not be able to actually attain political success. So parties, under the Political Parties Act that was signed by President Uhuru Kenyatta before he left office, created 2 possibilities of forming coalitions before elections and coalitions after elections. So parties in Kenya, by the very nature of our demographic and the devolution structure, and the 50+1 rule have created a situation where alliances are really a matter of course. And why Raila's legacy is about alliance building is that those parties that went into elections on their own or with very poor coalitions found they could not govern, found that they were having problems holding stability of governance because of rebellions of MCAs, having problems of governing because of numbers in Parliament and in the Senate. And so what has become a matter of course in the last 3 governments is a handshake. And the handshake has been because they needed to talk to the party with numbers bigger than their own. There's no secret that today William Ruto had no handshake with the other Democratic Party. He would have had it very hard to govern. And so what we are saying is that people don't come together for cabinet appointments. It's actually because the lay of the land in the country means that the inclusivity of the whole country across the wards to MPs and senators has been dictated by the 2010 constitution. Now, the parties that do not adapt to this will be facing elections. Let me give you the example of Kanu. Kanu could have run alone in the next election. Kanu could have decided to join the opposition in the next election or join the government parties. And now Kanu would have to sit down and calculate and see where are their electoral chances best. For example, Kanu will now compete in the Rift Valley for seats openly with UDA. there will be no party that has an advantage with the other. So the one that picks the best candidate, for example, in this expansive Rift Valley, will be able to run a candidate. And the chances are 50-50. The KANU may end up getting better MPs or better governors in that structure. It also then allows KANU to open other seats. As I said here in Nairobi, in the gubernatorial seat, there was only Sakaja with UDA. Now there is KANU with Tony Gachoka. Now, what the opposition do on the other side, whether they pick Nyakera or they pick Bobby Owino or they pick Gakuya or whoever, that's the opposition. They are quite happy to pick. But this side of government will either pick Tony Gachoka or Sakaja. Now, I believe that this coalition will pick Tony Gachoka as a best candidate. And therefore, already, Sakaja ataenda nyumbani from this side.
But Tony,
so that whoever then I face on the other side can be given by the opposition.
Tony, there is the coalition and the talks that happen behind doors that most of the time is usually a preserve of negotiators, one would say, the political parties. But if you come now to the side of Kenyans as well, if you look at political parties to be specific, there are leaders there. But remember, KANU has been there for over 60 years because of the support from the people, because these parties belong to the people and the members of these parties. So at what point then, when these conversations happen, that those who own the party as well have a say? Because as we said, seems as though these talks, these negotiations happen among besties, among friends, among people who sit in the same club. But when is it about Kenyans and what they want? Because you'd say, fine, Tony Gachoka is here, opposition would come with their people. But what if Nairobi citizens say, this is the candidate we want and we will push him?
Well, that's a very good point. But you remember that men in history have consequences. If Franklin Roosevelt did not get polio in 1914, a lot of people say his character was very abrasive and he would never have changed. If Winston Churchill did not died in the accident where the car almost hit him in New York in Fifth Avenue, there would have been no Winston Churchill. And the question is, if there was no Franklin Roosevelt and there was no Churchill, what would have been the fate of the world? Men matter. Men matter at certain points in history. And I would say that this coalition discussion we are having today at SpiceFM is following the death of a legend called Raila Odinga. And who has left in this country an open question as to whether the traditional way in which alliances are made among friends is the best way in which to contest for political power. He is arguing, as happened in South Africa with Mandela, that Mandela was jailed by de Klerk and the Boer regime. But eventually, ANC negotiated with the Boer regime, formed government, and de Klerk became the deputy president of Mandela. And it became a working democracy in South Africa, where Raila is saying, look, Kenyans can also work with people you've not agreed with and attain success. All I'm bringing is a debate at this horrid forum that people may have to start rethinking. That Tony Gachoka, he has not betrayed anyone because he wants to work with Kenya Kwanza. It is a political experiment that can result in political success. Just the same way, Gachagua did not know Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. And they said the other day they are just getting to know each other. But they are taking a political risk that may have results or not have results.
You're saying it's a political experiment.
It is.
That's interesting because the president, on the day after he had a meeting with Gideon Moi, said that the point of all of this was to take Kenya from third world to first world. He mentioned Singapore and he said that Gideon Moi is going to help him turn the country around. You are saying it's a political experiment. Let's see where we will go. Which one?
Let me tell you, every endeavor of man, even you're driving here in the morning to reach here and work and interview this great governor of Nairobi was an experiment. Because, ultimately you live in home with the expectation that you're getting here on time to do the interview. I mean the word experiment in the best possible way. Politics are not drawn or defined, as he said, by anybody but the people. What we do in politics is reorganize ourselves and offer ourselves to the public. Today, there are a lot of people in Kenya who are going to say, as long as Tony Gachoka is working with the William Ruto government, he was my governor, he's no longer my governor. There are others who are going to say, what has happened? Tony Gachoka has become there and he has been brought in to fight Gachagua. There's somebody else who's going to say, no, Tony Gachoka has been brought there because he was hungry. And all these things will come, but they do not manifest the fact that alliances must be made, even if those choices are difficult, if they are in your best interest. And what Raila Odinga will be judged for in the many, many years to come is, of all the years of our politics, has he made the best moves? Has he, by becoming defiant, becoming extraordinary, has he actually done things that very few could do because of cowardice? And in so doing, is that where his legend lies? And I said at the beginning of this program, the best thing Raila Odinga had to do for himself and country was to die. Because in his death, we cannot blame him. In his death, we cannot go and tell him, now pay for the Gen Z. In his death, you cannot go and say, pay for leaving us with Ruto. You cannot go and tell him, pay for, because he has already done it. You can only analyze the impact. And I'm saying, from what I saw in the outpouring of millions of Kenyans, the outpouring of Kenyans showed that this was a man who held every corner of the country in good grace, and that the country was overwhelmingly lauding his achievements as a hero and as a legend. And if he is the hero and the legend, by doing defiant things, by doing things other people will not do. I, Tony Gachoka, who has been a student of Raila Odinga for more than 25 years, I'm quite happy to go through that school, to go through that road, uncomfortable as it may be. Obviously, I will take some bumps down the road, but I can say here at SpiceFM, there was no point of coming otherwise to say that me, as Tony Gachoka, I am supporting Gideon Moi, I am supporting KANU in the alliance discussion with the Kenya Kwanza regime. Iwe iliwalo. And it becomes as clear as day and night. And the reason is, when then you go to face your opponents, let them people not say, no, you're hiding. You're part of opposition, you're part of this. It is not a decision that you come to lightly, but it's a decision that when you make it, then you fight for it, whatever the consequence. And I want to conclude by saying, when Raila Odinga said his last statement, there's a tweet which is really going viral. He says, I have defended the right of everyone to speak. Even when those people speak against me.
Do you think that Kano is going to be swallowed up in this thing? Because if we go by what we've seen before, it becomes a movement. Is there a position for Kanu to stamp its authority in this coalition, or is it a matter of numbers and Kanu is there for the taking?
Obviously, I haven't convinced you that I'm going to win the governor of Nairobi. I have some work to do, but I will try by the next time I'm here to give you more confidence. KANU is the oldest party in Kenya, and KANU has a national presence throughout. Of course, there is a weakness in ODM without Baba, and it is something we don't want to overshout today. I think getting a leader of Baba's stature and saving ODM from fracturing is easier said than done. I mean, there is going to be a lot of things that cannot help ODM become even a quarter of what it was without Baba. And through that process, there will be many political orphans, many of them who are not from ethnic groups, but are looking for a national home. The natural national home for ODM orphans is the ruling party since independence, which is the Kenya National African Union. KANU is waiting for the orphans of ODM. Many of them are going to come. There are parts where ODM displaced KANU, which were traditionally KANU areas. Northeastern Kenya, places like Lamu, parts of the Upper Rift like Sabot and Pokot, and many other places where KANU was very dominant. And then here in Nairobi, people forget, KANU was a dominant party with Tom Mboya, with Dengama Pinto, later with Mwai Kibaki. KANU has won in Nairobi very substantially. In fact, some of the greatest Kenyans have won on KANU in Nairobi. And therefore, I want to say our job, mine and Gideon Moi, and those who are going to, for all of us in KANU, is to revive hii jogoo, iwike kweli kweli, ili watu hata wale wako UDA waanze kuona kweli jogoo imeingia. And in Rift Valley, it was not that they gave us anything. In Rift Valley, they said, listen, we need unity, because the chances of Gideon Moi winning the Baringo senatorial seat was above average. And so we are not there out of weakness. We are there because it suits both parties.
Tony, questions abound. You've mentioned the June 24th Gen Z protest in the country and your position on that, on how the government handled the same. And now that you, as Tony Gachoka now, is part of, you are in KANU and there are discussions with government. What position, do you still hold the position that you held earlier, or Or how would you ensure that what was done to Kenyans then, that justice is served?
It is very...
In these marriage or coalition agreements and talks that you have, does it take away from the fact that what happened in June 24th needs justice and people need to pay for that?
I can't agree with you more. It's very unpresidential to shoot children on the legs. It's very unpresidential to abduct your citizens without trial. It's very unpresidential to instruct that people are denied their right to demonstrate. It's unpresidential, it is unconstitutional, it is unacceptable. We hope that through KANU's interference, that we will not only be loudly saying some of these things, but we'll be saying it to the right people, because we are not joining government in order that we perpetuate what is wrong. We have not entered as other people did. We didn't enter because of the pain. This alliance of KANU and UDA was not born of any blood. This was a straightforward political negotiation based on changing circumstances in Rift Valley and in the wider nation, and they were done purely on political interest. So I agree with you that in so doing we'll inherit some of the questions, the moral questions, and I want to say that we are going to be as transparent and as honest. One of the reasons I'm here on television today is because I feel that it is wrong for us to leave it as a guessing game. That where is KANU in this issue? Where is Tony Gachoka in this issue? It is better we win or we are burnt alive. Whichever way, it is the will of the people that will decide. I will be the governor of Nairobi or not, depending on what the voters want. But the first thing I must do is tell them straightforward that I'll be running for governor on a Kenya Kwanza ticket through KANU, and that is the position I've taken. And if that cost me the seat, it's possible, because, Raila Odinga ran 5 times and never won. But at least he was able to state his peace and his honesty. I believe that we cannot have a country where we isolate communities from each other. I think that this barrier of Raila was a wake-up call. The whole country needed to come together, because sometimes in death, you bring unity. You bring unity because it is a litmus test for the nation. Just like independence was a momentous period, I think the death of Raila Odinga will remain a reference point in Kenya as to how to do alliance building in the past. Are you going to carry a heavy heart? And as I told you, Musalia Mudavadi left NASA, which he founded, and joined William Ruto. People laughed at him, but he formed government. And that was not based on any blood. It was a political decision. So if you remove the Gen Z issue from it, there can be political decisions that can be made because they are strategic. So if Tony Gachoka is elected the governor of Nairobi under a KANU ticket, what does that mean for KANU? What does that mean for Mount Kenya politics? So it's not just an issue of just running. There can be somebody who is running in the opposition and lose. If William Ruto is re-elected president of Kenya, but Tony Gachoka is elected governor of Nairobi, what does that mean for the wider politics beyond the election of 2027? But if we go into a situation where Mount Kenya loses, for example, the presidency or the team of opposition lose, William Ruto lose, Nairobi is lost, what is there? Political realities will have to be recalculated. We must be able to not only be strategic, but also to look at where the alternatives are. Is there any likelihood that the opposition can reorganize in a way they can capture power? From my understanding, they have agreed that Kalonzo Musyoka will be the flag bearer of the opposition, and Eugene Wamalwa will be the deputy president in that coalition, and that Rigathi Gachagua will be the prime minister. And because of that, Gachagua will donate the governor of Nairobi. Now that is their setup. Now, obviously, if you are on the other side, you have to make a setup that is fighting that setup. Yesterday, I heard Uhuru Kenyatta say, and this morning, that he is completely committed to helping William Ruto and his government. So already you see a situation where the retired president has already taken sides against this coalition. And whatever his influence will be in 2027, it will be on the scales where KANU is. It will be on the scales where ODM is. It's scales where Fort Kenya is, and Mudavadi and the rest. So as KANU, if we have chosen a stronger side, and chosen that side and hopefully make sure that that side is a more accountable, transparent government, we have made a good political choice. And we will, of course, be judged by the public, because after all, we can only offer ourselves and allow the public to vote. And it is when they vote tunasema hiyo haki ya wananchi ndio msema kweli.
Yeah. We talk about coalitions, right? But here's a question where, so Tony Gachoka, KANU, UDA working together, you're given the ticket to run for Nairobi. So Nairobians would ask the question, we have been under previous governors, three, Kidero, Sonko, Sakaja. What's on the table for Gachoka, for Nairobi? What's this new thing you're bringing for them?
And we've said this before when I've been here. We really do need to have a program on Nairobi, because there's a lot I want to say as to what has led me to want to run. But
what's the pressing matter for?
Well, for me, the biggest thing in all this thing is corruption and the misuse of public resources. I just feel that integrity is missing. And you can hire competencies. You can work with people who can help you get the work done. But if at the end of the day, all the emphasis is on stealing and looting, all decisions, policy, and other words, are made to enrich the man on the top or his cahoots, then there can be no development. There can be no future in Nairobi. Certain things are just obvious. I mean, if you have borders running everywhere, you don't have a border policy. You don't know whether they are safe or not safe, if there are too many or too little. You have no way of ensuring that the safety of the city is there, because you are not having a register and you are not actually monitoring how that growth is. Because borders are a good system, but they only carry one person. They are better, more efficient public transport systems like trams and underground, which carry more people at less risk with more security because of cameras and so on. So you got to balance what you call the border matatu sector with public transport and trams and other things. And so in a modern city, you got to have a bird's eye view of some of these things. And the way in which things are being run here is on a knee-jerk reaction. And there are many things we can go back, from garbage disposal to our drainage systems to, even the traffic system and the way in which all that is run are areas we should go into some detail. And they've been done elsewhere in the world, but they've been done because efficient transports have been done. Waste management is no longer a problem. It's a very easy thing to do with proper technology and what you call a value chain system of carrying things to where they should be done at the right time. What we want to do is to have a proper, viable candidature in Nairobi. And I have to make a decision for myself as to where will I get the best chance to offer that to Nairobi. As we speak right now, I have a KANU gubernatorial ticket, and I'm not looking for it. It's already done. It's already decided. Now, it is for KANU to negotiate within the alliance we are in that my ticket is better than the current holder. And I think if our opinion poll was done, or a discussion within Kenya Kwanza was done, I would be a much better candidate for the coalition than Johnson Sakaja. And therefore, if you look at strategy, I would say I've done a good strategy to go with Gideon Moi into Kenya Kwanza. And I'm happy there to ask for my ticket. If I get it, I will win. If I don't get it, then we can come back here for another discussion.
Even as we close this conversation, do you think that it's aptly said that Raila Odinga, even as we remember him, and of course that charts the course for a lot of political alignments going forward, does he rightly then earn that title label as the man who was able to really know what would go into political alliances?
For a man who was detained with the allegation that he led a coup d'etat against the sitting president, for a man who left his party, Ford Kenya, to NDP and began a party of one from nothing, from a man who walked into KANU and who left in a half and left with rainbow, a man who said Kibaki Tosha, to a man who then went into the talks with Kofi Annan to become Kenya's second prime minister, to a man who shook Uhuru Muigai's hand and brought in the stability he needed, and finally to the man who shook William Ruto's hand when Obasanjo called a meeting in Mombasa. Very few men could take such blows in politics, such risks in politics, and still be called Agwambu, and still be called Jacom. He did all those things, and in spite of all that, we could not have enough time to bury him in 72 hours. So, Jacom, they say he who laughs last laughs loudest. You lived your life, you ran your race, we buried you on your own terms, you're Kenyan's giant, your footsteps will always walk through Kenya's hills. The music may have stopped, but the melody goes on. Kwaheri sana Jacom, kwaheri sana Raila Odinga, you've left your mark. Whatever the pundits say in history, nobody can ignore the name of Raila Amolo Odinga.
Well, thanks, Tony, for being here this morning, just to be able to try to understand what goes into, the minds of politicians and those who want to lend their hand towards leadership in the country, then for being able to be here with us and then being able to expand on that. It's going to be an interesting couple of days, and I'm not even saying weeks or months, days.
Particularly working with enemies you never thought you could work with. That's a big issue.
That too.
Yes.
That too. It'll be interesting times ahead, and we're wading into those waters already, and we're likely to see, I think we've already seen some of those, with folks saying certain things, and then of course we have to come back and continually ask the question that where do the people of Kenya lie in all of this? And I wish that would be one thing that is on the minds of many. As these coalitions are formed, as these alliances then are being discussed, that the main ingredient must be for the protection and the guarding of the livelihoods of Kenyans and for putting into consideration their thoughts.
If I could say the last thing, if the next election is now slowly becoming a contest between Rigathi Gachagua as the de facto leader and William Ruto as a de facto leader, the irony for Kenya is they both created each other. So we are now choosing between the two of them.
Indeed.
How ironical.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.